Welcome back, everyone. Today we're diving deep into From Idea to Exit, the entrepreneurial journey.
Sounds intense.
It is, but in the best way possible. We're using excerpts straight from the book, written by Jeffrey Weber.
Ah, the guy who built a company from scratch, got it on the Inc. 500 list twice, and then sold it to a Fortune 100 company.
That's the one. So think of this deep dive as like your cheat sheet to his entrepreneurial wisdom.
Makes sense. So where do we even begin with a journey like that?
Well, Weber argues that true entrepreneurship is more than just starting any business. It's about taking an idea and turning it into something that truly makes a difference.
Creating new industries, jobs, generating real wealth, that sort of thing.
Exactly. He uses a fantastic anecdote about Robert Kennicott to illustrate this.
Kennicott.
Yeah, the guy who helped found the Chicago Academy of Sciences when he was only 24.
Wow, 24. That's incredibly young to be making such a huge impact.
Right, and it perfectly captures what Weber calls going beyond the known.
So taking those leaps, those risks, it's interesting how he doesn't just tell inspiring stories, but gives us practical advice too.
Absolutely. He lays out a formula he calls IDEA, innovation, desire, effort, ability.
And I bet there's a catch. Can't be that simple.
You're right. He says those four things, plus the right situation and a well-spotted opportunity, lead to what he calls entrepreneurial activation.
It makes you think. A good idea by itself isn't enough. You need so much more for it to actually take off.
Definitely. But one of the biggest roadblocks Weber addresses is something he calls the risk box, that mental barrier that holds so many of us back. What do you think stops people from taking that leap, especially with starting a business?
Hmm. I'd say fear of failure is a big one. That and just the uncertainty of the unknown. It's comfortable to stay in familiar territory.
I totally get that. For me, it's that fear of pouring your heart and soul into something only to watch it, well, fail.
And Weber tackles that head on, right?
Hmm?
He even shares a story about his own dad choosing job security over the potential of owning a business.
He does, and it's so relatable. Choosing the known, even if it means sacrificing a dream.
But what's great is that Weber doesn't just leave us wallowing in those fears. He gives us actionable exercises to break through them.
I love that about his approach. He even has a section about analyzing your risk tolerance, like really understanding what you can handle emotionally and financially.
Like a reality check, right?
Yeah.
Figuring out your comfort zones. Have you ever tried those exercises?
Honestly, I haven't, but I'm definitely intrigued. You said it was eye-opening.
It was. I realized I was overestimating some risks while completely missing others.
Yeah,
Once I understood my own risk box, it made decision-making so much easier.
makes sense. Okay, so after we've tackled the mental game, Weber dives into the nitty-gritty of the startup phase, and he immediately busts that myth about 90% of businesses failing.
Oh yeah, that one.
Yeah.
I've heard that statistic thrown around so much.
It turns out it's not entirely accurate. Yeah, Weber points out that many of those failures are actually businesses evolving, pivoting, or even merging. The ones that do truly fail often fall prey to a few common pitfalls.
Like what?
He lists four: inadequate education and training, lack of planning, poor financial management, and the ever-present struggle to balance work and personal life.
It's interesting that he highlights education.
Right. He mentions that businesses run by college grads are statistically more likely to succeed. Makes you think.
It does. But practical experience is vital too. I mean, remember that story he tells about that dot-com boom web development firm?
The one that went bankrupt within a year because they blew all their cash on fancy offices and catered lunches.
Exactly. All image, no substance. It highlights the importance of being resourceful, that frugalpreneur mindset Weber talks about.
Like the story about him using his anniversary dinner to convince his wife to let him quit his day job.
Oh, talk about commitment.
I know, right? But it shows how much he believed in his vision.
And that leads perfectly into funding. It's such a crucial aspect, especially for those of us who aren't chasing venture capital.
Definitely. And since Weber self-funded his company, he offers great advice on alternative funding sources, things like angel investors, and even tapping into your network of family and friends.
But he's clear about treating them like real investors, right?
Yeah.
No taking advantage of personal connections.
Absolutely. Solid business plan, clear expectations, the whole nine yards. He even suggests researching things like legal structures, accounting, and insurance before seeking funding.
Being prepared from the get-go, that's essential.
Totally. And then there's a matter of finding the right partners. That can make or break a startup.
Oh, for sure. And Weber stresses finding partners with skills that complement yours, not just clones of yourself.
Right. He cautions against partnering with what he calls the other you, or the yes man. It's about having a team with diverse perspectives and expertise.
Makes sense.
And he's so candid about his own experiences, both the good and the bad. He shares this really relatable story about his initial partnership with Betsy and his wife, Lisa.
It's refreshing to hear that honesty. It shows that even successful entrepreneurs face challenges.
Absolutely. So business is growing, partnerships are hopefully working out, and then we hit the leadership phase.
Where things get really interesting.
And challenging. Weber is blunt. You can't be in the trenches forever. As your business scales, your role has to evolve.
From doer to leader.
Exactly. What do you think are the most important traits for a leader, especially in a fast-growing startup?
Adaptability for sure. Things change so rapidly, you need to be able to adjust on the fly. And communication, being able to clearly convey your vision and expectations. How about you?
Building trust is huge for me. Your team needs to trust you, especially when things get tough. Weber echoes that sentiment. He lists 10 essential skills for this phase: building a team, managing finances, delegating effectively.
Delegating. That's a tough one for many entrepreneurs.
I know, right? It's so tempting to micromanage when you've poured so much into every detail.
But Weber argues that micromanaging can stifle growth and demoralize your team.
It's like saying, I don't trust you to do this right, even if that's not your intention. So we're leading the team. We've got to keep things moving, which brings us to sales. And I have to say, this is one of my favorite parts of the book.
Me too. Weber's sales maxim is brilliant. Sales confidence, knowledge, customers, and product.
It's so simple, yet so powerful. He breaks down each part, arguing that real confidence comes from deep knowledge of what you're selling and who you're selling it to.
It's not just about pitching to everyone, right? You need to identify your ideal customer, understand their needs and influence.
Exactly. And then there's innovation. I love that Weber goes beyond the foosball tables and beanbag chairs stereotype.
Yeah. He talks about creating a company culture where everyone feels empowered to contribute ideas.
He even introduces two key roles: the idea agent and the activation agent.
So the idea agent is usually on the front lines, seeing problems and coming up with solutions.
Right. And the activation agent is typically someone in management who can take those ideas and put them into action.
Such a smart system. It utilizes the collective brain power of the entire team.
And Weber credits this system with helping his company adapt when online competition emerged. They shifted their focus to customer service while others got stuck in price wars.
Adaptability is key. But speaking of adapting, how do we keep the momentum going? How do we scale without losing our minds?
That's the million-dollar question. And Weber believes scaling can't be an afterthought. It needs to be part of your plan from day one.
Makes sense.
He shares how his company scaled, emphasizing technology and systems. But what really struck me was his focus on scaling your own skills as an entrepreneur.
It's not just the business that grows, right? You have to grow alongside it.
Exactly. And it's a massive mindset shift. He talks about going from doing everything yourself to leading a team and making strategic decisions.
Which can be really tough for some entrepreneurs who are used to being hands-on with every detail.
Totally. But eventually, that journey of growth leads us to the exit, knowing when to let go. And this is where things get emotional.
It's your baby. You've poured your heart and soul into it.
Exactly. But Weber guides us through the emotional and practical aspects of selling a business. He lists 10 signs that it might be time to exit.
Like market changes or even just losing your passion.
Both are valid reasons. And I admire his honesty about entrepreneurial burnout. It's real.
It is. But it's not just about recognizing the signs. It's about knowing what comes next. And that's where the negotiation phase comes in.
Where Weber almost made a huge mistake.
You mean that story about how he potentially lost millions because he rushed the sale of his company?
Yep, that one. A classic cautionary tale about the importance of understanding the negotiation process.
But thankfully, he provides a tool to help us avoid that same fate.
The negotiations worksheet. It's a structured way to assess your company's financial and intrinsic value, preparing you for those buyer discussions.
It's like having a secret weapon going into those high-stakes talks. And it highlights how much emotion can influence our business decisions.
It's not always just about the bottom line. So you've negotiated a good deal, you're ready to let go, but then comes due diligence. And remember Weber's anecdote about the frantic document search?
Oh yeah, that one was funny but stressful.
Totally. It highlights the importance of being organized from the start.
It's about having systems in place, making the transition smooth for everyone involved. So we've navigated the sale, we've dotted the I's and crossed the T's. What happens after the exit?
That's what we'll explore next. Weber describes it as shifting from employee back to entrepreneur.
It's like reclaiming that sense of ownership and that drive to create something new.
I'm really curious to hear his thoughts on that.
Me too. It's like, what happens to that entrepreneurial energy? Does it find a new outlet or just fade away?
Let's find out. It's fascinating to think about that shift from employee back to entrepreneur. It's almost like a full circle moment.
It is. And Weber talks about how even after achieving what many would consider the ultimate goal, selling your business, that entrepreneurial spirit often sticks around.
Like it's in your blood. Yeah.
Exactly. For some, it might mean jumping right into a new venture. For others, it could be mentoring or even just exploring creative outlets that took a back seat during the hustle of building a company.
It's about finding purpose and staying true to yourself, even after a major life change.
I love how Weber emphasizes that personal growth aspect throughout the book. It's not just about the business. It's about evolving as a person.
He's so right. Those lessons learned, the resilience you build, those are invaluable no matter what you do in life.
Absolutely. But before we get too far ahead, let's circle back to the core of it all. Weber's IDEA formula. Innovation, desire, effort, ability. Remember that.
Of course, it all starts with that spark of an idea, that moment of, aha.
And Weber believes true innovation comes from looking beyond the obvious, challenging those assumptions we often take for granted.
Like asking, why not? Instead of just accepting things as they are.
Exactly. It's about finding new and better ways to solve problems. Do you remember any examples from the book that illustrate this?
Oh, tons. Like how he saw that gap in the higher education market with his software company. He didn't just create another generic product, he tailored it to meet a specific need.
That's what sets true innovators apart. But an idea alone isn't enough, right? You need that fire in your belly, that unwavering desire to make it happen.
That's where the passion comes in, that fuel that keeps you going when things get tough, because let's be real, they will get tough.
Dober doesn't sugarcoat that at all. He's honest about the sacrifices and challenges that come with the territory.
He talks about the long hours, the setbacks, the moments of doubt, but he also highlights the immense satisfaction that comes from pushing through those challenges.
It's that sense of accomplishment, that feeling of knowing you created something from nothing.
And that brings us to the ability piece of the puzzle. Weber acknowledges that not everyone is born with the same skills, but he argues that many of the abilities needed for entrepreneurship can be learned and developed.
It's about being a lifelong learner, right?
Mm.
Constantly seeking out knowledge, surrounding yourself with people who can challenge and inspire you.
He stresses the importance of mentorship, of learning from those who have walked the path before you.
And being open to feedback. Even if it's tough to hear sometimes, that constructive criticism can be invaluable.
It's all part of that growth mindset. But even with the best idea, the burning desire, and the skills to back it up, you need something else. The ability to spot opportunities.
To see those gaps in the market, those unmet needs, those trends that others might be missing.
And timing is everything, right? An idea too early might flop. Too late, and you've missed the boat. It's about finding that sweet spot where your idea aligns with market demand.
And that's where research and analysis come in. Weber talks about the importance of testing your assumptions, validating your ideas before investing too much time or money.
It's about mitigating risk, which brings us back to that big R word that often holds people back. Risk.
Ah, yes, the risk box. That mental hurdle we all have to face at some point.
And remember that story about Weber's dad choosing the security of a job over the uncertainty of entrepreneurship? It highlights how deeply ingrained risk aversion can be.
It's like a primal instinct. We're wired to avoid danger and uncertainty. But Weber encourages us to examine our fears, to understand where they're coming from, and to develop strategies for managing them.
It's not about being reckless. It's about understanding your own risk tolerance, calculating those potential downsides and the possible rewards.
It's about making informed decisions, not letting fear paralyze you. And once you've tackled that mental game, you're ready to dive into the startup phase where, as we discussed, things can get messy.
Right. But remember, that statistic about 90% of businesses failing, Weber debunks that myth. Many of those are just businesses evolving and adapting.
The ones that do fail often make those classic mistakes. Poor planning, bad financial decisions, that inability to find a work-life balance.
And he offers really practical advice for avoiding those pitfalls. Like, having a solid business plan is crucial, even if you're not seeking outside funding.
It's your roadmap, your guide, and of course, managing your finances wisely.
He talks about the importance of tracking cash flow, avoiding unnecessary expenses, being smart with your resources, especially in the early stages.
And finding those complementary partners, those people who bring different skills and perspectives to the table.
Remember his story about his partnership with Betsy and his wife Lisa? It's so relatable. It highlights those early struggles and how they learned to navigate them as a team.
Exactly. Partnerships are a two-way street. You need to be able to communicate openly, compromise when necessary, and ultimately work towards a shared vision.
And once you've got that team in place, you need to figure out the funding piece of the puzzle. And for those not going the venture capital route, Weber offers a ton of alternative options.
He's a big fan of frugalpreneurship, being resourceful, scrappy, doing more with less. Remember that story about him hauling his own trade show materials?
Talk about dedication, but it shows that entrepreneurial hustle. He wasn't afraid to roll up his sleeves and get things done.
And he gives specific advice on approaching angel investors, leveraging your network, even exploring crowdfunding.
But he's adamant about treating all investors with respect, regardless of their connection to you. Solid business plan, clear expectations, transparency, those are non-negotiables.
It's about building trust and showing that you're serious about your venture. And as your business gains momentum, you hit that running phase where things can get really exciting, but also really demanding.
That's where your role as a leader has to shift, right? From being in the weeds to being the strategist, the visionary.
Weber is very clear. You can't be the doer forever. You have to delegate, empower your team, and focus on the big picture. What are some of those leadership skills he emphasizes?
Well, building a strong team, of course, but also managing finances effectively, fostering a culture of innovation, creating a positive work environment, and constantly adapting your leadership style as your business grows.
He talks about the importance of self-awareness, of knowing your strengths and weaknesses, and of seeking out mentors who can guide you.
And one thing that really stood out to me was his focus on maintaining a strong customer-centric approach, even as your business scales.
It's so easy to lose sight of that when you're caught up in the day-to-day operations.
But he provides strategies for gathering customer feedback, measuring satisfaction, and using that data to make informed decisions.
It's about staying connected to the people you're serving. And he also doesn't shy away from the less glamorous parts of running a business, like managing risk, protecting your intellectual property, and ensuring ethical practices.
Remember his experience with dealing with embezzlement?
Oh, yeah. That was a tough one. But it highlights the importance of having checks and balances in place
Absolutely. You have to protect your business and your team.
and be willing to have those tough conversations, to hold people accountable, to make difficult decisions.
It's all part of being a leader. And speaking of leadership, let's talk about one of Weber's strengths, his approach to sales.
Yes. That sales maxim. Sales confidence, knowledge, customers and product. It's brilliant in its simplicity.
He argues that true sales confidence comes from deep knowledge of both your product and your target market.
You have to understand their needs, their pain points, and be able to articulate how your product provides solutions.
And it's not about just closing deals. It's about building relationships, creating those win-win situations.
He talks about the importance of listening, of tailoring your approach to each customer, of genuinely wanting to help them succeed.
And then he dives into innovation. And I love how he stresses that it's not just about coming up with the next big thing.
Right, it's about creating a culture where everyone feels empowered to contribute ideas.
He encourages companies to create systems for capturing those ideas, for evaluating them, and for putting the best ones into action.
And to be willing to experiment, to take calculated risks, to embrace the possibility of failure as a learning opportunity.
That growth mindset is so important. But how do you scale that innovation as your business grows? How do you avoid getting stuck in the weeds?
That's where Weber's ideas about scaling come in.
He believes that scaling can't be an afterthought. It needs to be part of your strategic plan from the very beginning.
He talks about the importance of investing in technology and systems that can support growth, as well as developing your own leadership skills.
That transition from doing everything yourself to building and empowering a team can be challenging.
But it's essential if you want your business to truly thrive. And he also talks about the importance of scaling your skills as an entrepreneur.
Because as your business grows, so do the demands on your time and expertise.
You have to learn new things, seek out mentors, and be open to feedback. You have to constantly evolve as a leader.
It's a journey of continuous learning and growth. And ultimately, that journey leads us to the exit phase, that moment when you decide to let go of the business you've poured your heart and soul into.
Which can be incredibly emotional.
It's not just a business transaction, it's letting go of something that's become a part of you. But Weber guides us through that process, offering both emotional and practical advice.
He lists those telltale signs that it might be time to exit. Market changes, burnout, that feeling of needing a new challenge.
And he reminds us that it's okay to move on, to recognize that a chapter in your entrepreneurial journey has come to an end.
And to be prepared for that next chapter.
It really is a journey, isn't it? From that initial spark of an idea to building a successful business and eventually letting it go.
And finding that what's next. Weber talks about transitioning from employee back to entrepreneur, almost like reclaiming that sense of ownership.
It's interesting how he frames it that way. I guess after running your own company, going back to a traditional job might feel, well, a bit restrictive.
Exactly. He talks about how, even after selling his business, that entrepreneurial spirit didn't just disappear.
Like a fire that's been banked but not extinguished.
Yeah. He says for some, it means starting something new right away. For others, it's mentoring or exploring creative passions that were put on hold.
Like rediscovering those things that bring you joy and fulfillment.
It's about finding that balance, right, between work, life, and everything in between.
As we wrap up this deep dive into From Idea to Exit, what resonated most with you? What will you take away from Weber's journey?
Honestly, it's that emphasis on personal growth. He reminds us that entrepreneurship isn't just about building a business. It's about building yourself.
Becoming more resilient, more adaptable, more confident in your abilities.
Exactly. And he shares his own story with such vulnerability and humor. It makes the advice feel more real, more attainable.
I agree. It's not just a dry business book. It's a story full of relatable experiences and valuable lessons, even if you've never started a business.
And that's the power of it,
Right.
right? He inspires you to believe that you can achieve great things even if you're starting from scratch.
Okay, before we sign off, I want to leave everyone with a question. If you could start any business right now with everything we've learned from Weber, what would it be?
Think big. What problem are you passionate about solving? What impact do you want to make on the world?
Let those ideas simmer. Maybe this deep dive is the spark you needed to ignite your own entrepreneurial journey.
Who knows? And remember, the path to success is rarely straightforward. It's full of twists and turns.
But with the right mindset, a solid plan, and a bit of that entrepreneurial grit, you can achieve amazing things.
And don't forget the importance of continuous learning and growth. Embrace those challenges, seek out mentors, and never stop evolving.
That's such great advice. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into From Idea to Exit.
It's been a pleasure exploring Weber's insights with you.
We hope you found it valuable and inspiring. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep chasing those entrepreneurial dreams.